If you really look at the major sources of stress in modern life, things like the rigid workplace or the sheer complexity of everything, it feels like we're constantly making the same mistake over and over.
We are. And we're diving into that today with a collection of um, really sharp philosophical aphorisms. They all kind of revolve around how we deal with what we fundamentally don't know.
And our guide for this is a pretty unsettling figure from Greek mythology,
Right,
Procrustes.
Procrustes. For anyone who doesn't know the story, he was, let's say, a host with a very particular and very disturbing brand of hospitality.
He would offer travelers a place to rest in his special iron bed.
But here's the catch. The bed was this static, sacred thing. If you were too tall for it, he'd chop off your legs.
And if you were too short, he'd stretch you on a rack until you fit perfectly.
The fit was absolutely mandatory. But the human, the traveler, was the part that was always brutally altered.
That terrifying image is the key to this whole deep dive. Our sources use this myth to describe a modern human tendency. When reality doesn't fit our neat little models, we don't change the model.
No, we try to squeeze reality into our prepackaged narrative. It's the ultimate error in design, what the sources call the inverse operation. You change the person, not the bed.
And this isn't some abstract philosophical problem. I mean, it's happening right now.
It is. The sources give this just a stunningly clear example right at the start.
Which is,
The observation is that very few people realize we're changing the brains of school children with medication to make them adjust to the curriculum.
instead of changing the curriculum to fit the child,
Exactly. The system, the bed, it stays pristine. But the human being has to be chemically tailored to fit inside it.
it's the ultimate cost of compliance. So
Yeah.
our mission today is to unpack these ideas and to identify where this backward fitting is causing the most damage in our lives, intellectually and professionally.
We're looking for the tools to recognize when we're being asked to lie in a Procrustean bed.
Okay, so let's start with part one. This trap of reduction and the allure of false certainty. The source material itself, being just aphorisms, is already kind of a statement against big, bloated systems of thought.
Precisely. The format itself is a critique. And speaking of institutions, the sources launch this, incredibly cynical critique of academia. They say, academia is to knowledge what prostitution is to love.
Wow.
Close enough on the surface, but to the non-sucker, not exactly the same thing.
So what are they really getting at there? It's more than just bad research.
Oh, much more. It suggests that once knowledge becomes this formalized career, with tenure and grants,
Wow.
the incentives completely shift.
Away from truth?
And toward conformity, toward
Yeah.
production. You're fitting your ideas into the shape of a grant application or a journal format. The system itself starts consuming the truth seeker.
And this system produces a very dangerous kind of person, the educated fool.
Absolutely. The sources warn that education makes the wise slightly wiser, but the fool vastly more dangerous. An uneducated fool is, mostly harmless.
Their influence is limited.
But the educated fool has institutional authority. They've mistaken the map for the territory, and their errors become systemic. They become far-reaching.
So then, what about good ideas? What makes an idea truly original? The sources challenge the standard definition.
They do. They argue that an idea's originality isn't the absence of a predecessor. It's the presence of multiple, but incompatible predecessors.
So it's not a straight line.
No, it's a synthesis. It's born from conflict, from overcoming that Procrustean need to fit into one neat intellectual camp.
And yet, we're always trying to find those neat narratives, aren't we? Always trying to predict and impose order.
All the time. And the complexity of the modern world just makes it worse. I love this one observation. Medieval man was a cog in a system he didn't understand.
Okay.
But modern man is a cog in a complicated system he thinks he understands. And that conviction, when the system is just too complex to grasp, that's where the fragility comes from.
This leads right into what they call the calamity of the information age. We're just drowning in data.
And gaining no clarity. The line is so stark. The toxicity of data increases much faster than its benefits. More information doesn't mean better decisions,
It just means more noise.
and more potential to overfit false patterns, to see connections that just aren't there.
So if more information isn't the answer, where does mental clarity come from? The sources suggest it's not cognitive, it's something else.
It's courage. Mental clarity is the child of courage, not the other way around. It takes guts to step away from the consensus narrative.
Which means real knowledge is about taking things away,
Yes, it's a subtractive process. You're not adding new facts. You're clearing out the junk left behind by those other systems.
All right, so the first trap is intellectual. The second Procrustean bed is, well, probably the one we all feel the most, the modern economy.
The sources paint this deeply pessimistic picture of modern life as just a series of boxes, geometrically smooth, with none of the randomness of actual life.
It's so claustrophobic when they lay it out. You're born in a box, go home to a box, work in a cubicle box, drive in a box.
And die in a box. The geometric perfection is a kind of sickness, a pathology of repetition,
And they compare it to a physical injury.
a repetitive stress injury. In nature, you never repeat the exact same motion. But in captivity, the office, the commute life is just that, repetitive injury, mentally and physically.
And the state of employment itself gets called out as this kind of existential halfway house.
It's an incredible line. There is no intermediate state between ice and water, but there is one between life and death, employment.
It implies you're giving up a core part of what it means to be alive, your agency.
Yes, and they detail that loss of agency by comparing modern employees to historical slaves. The claim is that slaves in Roman or Ottoman times didn't need to flatter their boss.
That is a deeply unsettling thought. The burden shifts from physical work to this constant psychological performance.
It attacks your internal self. And this reframes the whole pursuit of success within that box. It starts with what we're addicted
It's
to.
famousness, right? The three most harmful addictions are heroin, carbohydrates, and a monthly salary.
That monthly salary locks you into the cycle. It's the addiction that keeps you in the Procrustean bed.
So if that's the addiction, what's real success?
It's one single measure, how much time you have to kill. Success isn't about being busy. It's the freedom from being busy. It's having options.
Which explains the contempt for busyness. You know, when someone says, I'm so busy, the sources say they're either declaring incompetence
Or they're just trying to get rid of you. Busyness is a performance, not a virtue.
and wealth itself gets redefined. It's not about addition, it's about subtraction.
The idea of unwealth, what you have minus what you want to have. If you can manage your desires, you instantly become wealthier because that second number shrinks.
It's all about who you compare yourself to, which brings up that advice on who you socialize with.
Right. The fastest way to become rich is to socialize with the poor. The fastest way to become poor is to socialize with the rich.
It's just simple consumption bias. Your baseline for what's normal changes.
And ultimately, the sources say this is modernity's great failure. We created youth without heroism, age without wisdom, and life without grandeur. We've traded messy, vital life for something sterile.
Okay, so let's turn to that vital, messy existence. Part 3. Let's talk about social dynamics, human interaction, outside of those rigid boxes.
This is where the aphorisms get really insightful about our personal blind spots, like conflict. They point out the most depressing aspect of arguing couples.
What's that?
They are almost always unaware of the true subject of the argument.
They're having a Procrustean argument. They take this big, messy, existential thing like fear or resentment, and they squeeze it into a tiny little box labeled, "You forgot to take out the trash."
Exactly. They fit a huge emotional conflict into a simple, reductive narrative. And if you find yourself in a conflict, there's some key advice on defense.
Which is to say nothing.
Pretty much. Your reputation is harmed the most by what you say to defend it. Every defense just gives them a new angle to attack.
Let's talk about intense emotions. There's a really complex idea in here about hate.
Yes. That hatred is much harder to fake than love. You hear about fake love all the time, but never fake hate.
But the more critical point is about unrequited hate.
That's the real insight. Unrequited hate is vastly more diminishing for the self than unrequited love.
How so?
Well, love, even if it isn't returned, is an expansive feeling. It grows your internal world. Hate, though, is a binding obsession. It needs a target. And if that target is indifferent to you,
You're just pouring your energy into a vacuum.
and diminishing yourself in the process, it's all about nuance, which brings us back to this tension between the universal and the particular.
How do we spot the error of applying the wrong scope to a problem?
The source gives us three roles. The fool generalizes the particular, the nerd particularizes the general, the wise does neither.
So the fool has one bad experience and says, all X are bad.
And the nerd gets so lost in the details of a general rule they can't make a practical decision. The wise person avoids both traps.
And the highest form of seeing the particular, the unique case, is love itself.
Defined as the complete victory of the particular over the general and the unconditional over the conditional.
That's the ultimate anti-Procrustean idea. refusing to measure someone against a universal checklist.
Exactly. And that refusal of simple binaries is at the core of the whole philosophy here. The sources say Western thought needs a crucial shift
Away from true-false.
and toward two other pairs, robust, fragile, and sucker, non-sucker.
That's the real framework for dealing with the unknown. You stop asking, is this perfectly correct? And you start asking,
Is this durable? Will it survive a shock? And am I being taken for a ride?
which connects right back to wisdom being a subtractive process.
Right. It's not a to-do list. It's a what not to do list.
Yeah.
And they say the best way to spot a charlatan is someone who tells you what to do instead of what not to do.
So true intelligence isn't about collecting facts.
No. Intelligence consists in ignoring things that are irrelevant. It's filtering out the noise to avoid those false patterns.
Okay, which brings us to part 4. Applying this robust, fragile idea to big systems, to ethics, and to this concept of the magnificent life.
One of the most damning points is about complexity itself. The claim is that the separation between the ethical and the legal grows in a complex system.
Why is that?
Because as systems get huge and opaque, like global finance, you can't possibly write laws to cover every ethical loophole. So legality just becomes a game of technical compliance.
And the sophisticated actor can be completely immoral without ever breaking a single rule.
Precisely. And if you apply that robust versus fragile idea to people, you get this fantastic contrast between, say, the artist and the politician.
The artist is robust.
Yes, they care more about the few who like their work than the many who dislike it. Validation is internal. The politician is fragile. They care more about the few who dislike them because they need mass consensus.
They're completely dependent on external opinion, and that changes how they see failure.
For the robust, an error is information. It's data. It makes you stronger. For the fragile, an error is just an error. It's a wound to be hidden because it threatens their entire identity.
Which finally brings us to the person who lives free of all these constraints. The magnificent individual, the megalocycos.
This is the ideal. The great-souled person who operates on purely internal, unconditional standards. The weak person shows their strength and hides their weaknesses.
But the magnificent person.
Exhibits their weaknesses like ornaments. It's not humility, it's profound confidence. It says, your judgment of my flaws is completely irrelevant to me.
And their generosity has to be unconditional too. What's the ultimate test?
Pure generosity is when you help the ingrate. Any other form, the source says, is self-serving because you're expecting something back.
Yeah.
Gratitude, at least. Helping the ungrateful is a purely robust act.
So this whole deep dive really is a training manual for recognizing when we're being forced into that Procrustean bed, whether it's our job, our knowledge, or our definition of success.
And real freedom comes from subtraction, not addition. Subtracting junk knowledge, subtracting our dependence on others' opinions, subtracting that need for validation. You have to constantly ask, am I changing myself, or should I be changing the bed?
And for you, the listener, we want to leave you with a final, provocative thought from the sources on what it means to achieve that conscious freedom.
You exist if and only if you are free to do things without a visible objective, with no justification, and above all, outside the dictatorship of someone else's narrative.
The path to real insight might just start by walking very, very slowly, setting yourself free from the debilitating thing called work, and just listening for what's on the other side of that veil of opacity.